Hi everyone. Welcome back to Behind the Faders, the channel where we talk about all aspects of live sound mixing and live sound in general. And today I want to talk about something we always have to do first before we can start mixing anything. We have to put some mics on some instruments, and the biggest amount of mics usually goes onto a drum kit in a normal band scenario. And we'll cover different setups and we'll cover different show sizes, different environments. And we start with the usual rock pop drum kit in a small environment, so a small club, hotel bar, anything like that. And I'd like to start with the one element of a drum kit that always needs a mic, and that's of course the kick drum. There's a good variety of kick drum mics out there, and every engineer I know has a very strong opinion about his favorite kick drum mic. So let's start with my personal favorite. This is a Shure Beta 52. I've been using this mic pretty much since it came out, and I hardly use something else. It gives me everything I ever need from a kick drum. But that's just me. This is an omnidirectional mic, Shure Beta 91A. Many engineers like this, often in combination with a dynamic mic, that usually happen in bigger environments. It's so-called kick-in, kick-out setup. It never worked for me, but it's very common. When it comes to omnidirectional mics, there's also something else to consider, because that mic just rests inside of the kick drum. So in this small environment, first of all, you spare a mic stand. And let's face it, most small clubs do not have enough small mic stands for whatever reason. And also, if you don't have a drum riser and a small stage, you avoid the risk of somebody accidentally kicking that mic stand out of the way. And then there's probably nobody to fix it because nobody's watching the stage. So keep that in mind. This is a good reason for using an omnidirectional mic on a small stage. This is an AKG D112. This microphone replaced the famous D12 in 1986 or so. This is a very successful mic as well. For me, it works best on kind of a bit retro, classic rock, classic blues thing. Not so well for modern kick drum sounds, but again, that's just me. And finally, here's an Audix D6. It's more popular in the States than it is in Europe, or at least in Germany. And I can't say a lot about it because I've never used one. I just see it on many American technical riders. And of course, there's a lot more. I mean, every brand has a dedicated kick drum microphone. So if you have the chance to experiment, do that and find out about your favorite kick drum microphone. The position of the kick mic is usually like this. There's usually a hole in every kick drum resonance head, and you just stick the microphone into the hole. If you want a little bit more attack out of it, you can try to point the microphone at the center of the other head where the beta hits. If you should come across a kick drum with no hole in it, some people don't do that, which is then usually like a classic rock or an old funk band, stuff like that. You just put it in front of the resonance head center. And if you find a kick drum with no head at all, no resonance head at all, you just, same position, but you stick it into the shell. But that's very rare. I haven't seen a kick drum with no resonance head for ages. So next up, snare drum. And the most common choice is still, after all these years, the good old Shure SM57. I know some engineers hate it. Sometimes I feel like they want to hate it because they want to differ and come up with their own secret weapon, but it's still the most common choice. It's inexpensive, and you find SM57s everywhere. Everyone has an SM57. And to be honest, in a small environment, the snare miking is not even so crucial because most of what you're going to hear from the snare will come from the snare itself, to the point where it's even too loud. And then, yeah, there's a little bit of a workaround, but we come to that in another video. The position of the snare mic is typically above the rim of the snare, with about 2 fingers worth of a distance and pointing at the center of the snare drum, where hopefully the stick will hit most of the time. You could also use a clip mic for the snare drum, like the ones we are talking about now when we come to the tom-toms. The most used tom mic these days, I think, seems to me like that, is the Sennheiser 604, formerly known as the 504. These are pretty inexpensive mics. They're very durable. It's a one-piece thing with mic and clip, and everybody uses them. Of course, there's also alternatives, like my favorites are really the Shure Beta 98s, but they're not as durable. They are very sensitive. It's an electret condenser mic, so if it gets hit, it might break. And so most of the time I go with the Sennheisers as well. Position of tom mics, well, with clip mics you have not many choices. It's about like this, and again, the microphone should be pointed at the center of the drum. What for a rock pop kit in a small environment, that's it. You don't need a hi-hat mic because the snare mic will do that job. And in general, all the cymbals, everything made of tin, will be amplified well enough by all the other mics on stage. First of all, by the vocal mics. You'll get into situations where the cymbals are painfully loud in the center vocal. So there's no need for overheads. However, there's another aspect to that. For me, maybe that's just me again, but for me, especially like a hard rock kit or a heavy metal kit, just doesn't look right without overheads. So I would very often just put up overheads for the looks and not use them. So that's the rock pop thing, or reggae thing, or whatever, the closed mic thing. When it comes to music genres that require a very acoustic, natural sound, you can take a different approach, like jazz, folk, some parts of singer-songwriter. You get the picture. In that scenario, I would only mic the kick drum, even though the kick drum is usually in these genres a not very prominent part of the mix, but just to have a little control over it. And then use two overhead mics, which is usually a small diaphragm condenser. A little bit from behind, pointing at the snare drum in the same distance. So you maintain the center image of the snare. It's not so crucial in small environments, but if you do it anyway, you get into the habit and you don't even have to think about it. And if it gets bigger, it can become important to have this triangle on the snare. And by coming from behind, you also cover the toms. And this setup goes for any size of a show, really. Maybe on a bigger open air stage, I would add a snare mic, just to be safe. But this kick to overhead scenario works for these drones very well. Now let's come back to the rock pop kit and let the shows get bigger. Now you've got to introduce a few more microphones. First of all, now you need a hi-hat mic, which is also usually a small diaphragm condenser like this. The position, it varies. This is very common. I started miking the hi-hat from underneath, really, to get rid of some of the spill from the snare. For me, it works very well. So, and now you do need the overheads. Maybe not from behind. Usually they come from the front, but they still should have this triangle on the snare. There's a different approach to whether you really just want to capture the cymbals. Some people use the approach of basically covering entire kit, even though it's already close mic'd. In which case you can also use a large diaphragm condenser mic, which by the way also goes back to the jazz kit. You cover the whole kit, and so you might want to use a large diaphragm condenser like the C440 by AKG, if available. But you do need overheads now. Then the next two mics are a bit optional. First of all, there's snare bottom. If it gets really big and the snare is entirely a sound part of the PA sound, then sometimes you don't have enough of the actual snare carpet. This is where snare bottom comes into play. I couldn't really find a picture of a snare bottom position, but usually I put it just straight up close to the bottom head, next to the snare carpet, not directly on the carpet, in about the same position at the top mic. It will naturally sit a little bit more inside of the drum. And don't forget to flip the polarity switch on your desk on that channel, because obviously the membrane is moving in a different direction. And the last extra mic you could consider is a microphone for your right cymbal. Also, I mic it from below, as many other people do, and that will also be a small diaphragm condenser. And that's it for the microphones. I mean, if I forgot something or you got any questions or comments, comment section. Now let's talk a little about mic stands. There's one thing I see happening a lot, that is mic stands that are loose. So please make sure all mic stands are properly tightened up. It can be a lifesaver, because at some point the snare mic will drop onto the snare drum, or the overheads bent down, stuff like that. Please make sure, I mean, this basically goes for all mic stands, of course, but it's very crucial on the drums because it's so many moving parts, especially on a drum riser. So take your time, tighten them up, and then after sound check or sometime before the show, just go over them again and make sure they're still tight. It can be a lifesaver. Ask me how I know, especially if there's nobody watching the stage. Now, I want to talk a little about the snare mic stand, because you might have found out this mic stand is not easy to position because it's such a crowded part of the drum kit. So here's a good tip. Instead of waiting for the drummer to set up the entire kit and then trying to fiddle that thing in, as soon as the snare is set up, before the guy puts all the other stuff around, just place the mic stand somewhere next to the snare drum. And then by doing this, there's always a way to kind of fit in these three legs into the rest of a drum kit. I've never seen it failing, really. What you shouldn't do, and I've seen that as well, people giving up and then positioning the snare stand kind of outside the kit with a long extended boom onto the snare. That most of the time that doesn't work. It will somehow move around. Don't do that. Take your time and try to find a proper position for your snare top mic. Now for snare bottom, if you can get hold of one, use this one. This is meant to go on a table for a conference. It's a table stand, but the small round base perfectly fits in between the legs of the snare drum, and then you just have the mic on it pointing straight up. It works perfectly in most scenarios, and it will be out of the way of everything else. So this is about all I can think of right now about miking drums. If you think I forgot something or I gave wrong information, please leave a comment and tell me. With that said, I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.